In the past, there's been situations where I've seen language or discussions that I should have said something and I didn't.
I've been in situations where I felt, it's gone too far here. It's sickening to hear these kind of comments.
It does take courage, to stand up.
There would be no reason to have a go at men if men just behave.
What you consume is what you become, isn't it?
Exactly. People need to be careful what they consume.
I suppose the important thing for that is just being aware and knowing this is wrong or this isn't a joke.
That's the shift in mindset we need to kind of overcome.
In terms of if we've established that something needs to be done about this situation and we try and call things out, when you have had in a situation where you've tried to sort of intervene or say something, how has that been received and how have you felt about it?
I've been in situations where I felt, it's gone too far here. Unfortunately, it's probably under alcohol influence. It's on a night out where I felt this has gone too far in my head, and unfortunately, the fallout of that, it's never productive when it's alcohol's involved. But because of that, that person who I did initiate the kind of confrontation at times called me up the next day, recognised what he did wasn't correct, and apologised for his behaviour. And we moved on from that. As men tend to do, it's kind of like a shake of hands, never speak of it again, which, if anything, that's the wrong approach. You need to be acknowledging it and processing it and spreading the word. So that was a couple of years ago now, which I still remember quite fondly, and I'm trying to be more proactive, especially on a WhatsApp group, because it's closed. It's within you, it's in front of your face, and you see it. How you deal with that is down to you at the end of the day. It's, again, like we've spoken about, accountability. We need to do that more across all facets of communication.
But it does, I mean, you say perhaps that wasn't the best way to sort of proceed in terms of just, we forgot about it now. However, like at the very least, he did listen to you, which is a positive thing, isn't it?
Yeah, he's definitely, the message was there and it was received. Whether or not it was a time to implement that I need to recognise that it wasn't the time. I felt there was something that needed to be spoken about another day. Which the important thing, I wanted that reaction from it, and it came from it, and we can move forward on it. It's probably, like I said, not been spoken about again, but I'm glad I made that point at that time.
I suppose the interesting thing to be aware of is, and again, this isn't a good thing, but I think often men are more likely to listen to other men and respect that viewpoint. And respect is important because if you've got a true friendship, there is a level of respect, and people and your friends will listen to you even if they don't like what they hear. So you almost got to use that respect that they've got for you.
Yeah, for sure. Because when you're talking to the same gender, you can almost put yourself in their shoes more than the opposite gender. So it's like they can be like, bro, man to man, what you did was a bit weird. But then even when you said how you came across, everything, like just label it all, say it as it is. That's how I do it to one of my boys. And even I'd have to come from an understanding, a related point of view where it's like, I get why you said this, I get how it ended up being this way, but I feel like you kind of steered off into the wrong direction when you went to say this, because gender-based violence it seems like it's something that people just give a side eye to, like just look away from it. But there's a disrespect thing going on here. It's like, let's just catch them there. Let's bring it to the root, because everything's going fine. But now I've realized maybe if another woman might come to you confidentially and say, yo, your friend was moving a bit weird back then. Let me go talk to him, because like, can you go talk to him? They'll tell me to go talk to my friend, innit? And then they'll be like, maybe I can get through to them better because they're my friend. And obviously, if she tried to get through to him, it would be like, right, he might come back and be like, yo, that girl said something weird about like this and that. Did you guys see that? And then it's like another opportunity for you to be like, actually, yeah, I did, but you didn't say anything then. So from that point onwards, men should be taking advantage of these moments where if you see something wrong, just tell your friend real quickly so they can cut it out so we move on.
And when you have called it out, what has the reaction been? Have they listened to you?
Yeah, I feel like they've listened to me, because it's more of a respect thing where it's like, wow, good looking out type thing. You looked out for me, because I didn't see that. The person who's the perpetrator didn't see that. But if a man was able to see that, which we should be seeing it, and even though we do see it, we're in situations, like we said before, it's like banter to them, innit? But some things are just crossing the line now. In today's society, people are getting cancelled for that. You gotta be careful. So for real, it's good when like you're being told from earlier, so you can prevent it from happening again in the future.
I mean, I in the past, there's been situations where I've seen language or discussions that I should have said something and I didn't. But there've also been situations where I have, and in those situations, you can have a variety of reactions, and one that you can often get. Again, it's that thing a bit about being a killjoy. Is like they can be slightly mardy towards you, and you might even get a situation where you know that sort of in private, they're thinking, why was he being such a? What was his problem? But if the worst reaction you can get as a man speaks to another man is them being mardy to you, that's not that bad, is it? Compared to what the alternative is of not saying anything.
I think it's easier to have these kind of conversations with people we know and we trust, we're comfortable with, our friends. It could be, our brothers, our fathers, uncles. I think what's more difficult is when it's in the workplace, perhaps a colleague, and then you start worrying about how that might come back on you in terms of maybe your job security, or say strangers if you're out at an event or a party where you don't know how they might react. So I think we can all start somewhere.
It's also that thing of we talk about how we feel in certain situations as men when we see other men acting a certain way, and that silent majority thing of like you don't know how everyone else might be feeling. They might be feeling exactly the same way as you, but you could remain quiet as they remain quiet. But as soon as somebody pipes up, it can make people think, actually they're right, and I'm really glad that they spoke up because I feel the same way. You shouldn't always assume that it's just you who's feeling uncomfortable, because that point about the side, I think like everyone I think knows when a situation is slightly dodgy or is veering into a sort of dynamic that's uncomfortable.
We all have like a kind of a natural instinct and a gut reaction, and I think if you have that kind of empathy towards fellow human beings, like and it's making you feel uneasy, then hopefully you can presume that other people might be kind of experiencing the same feelings, and that it does take courage, to stand up and call people out. But hopefully there is, like you're saying, like a kind of a bit of a tipping point where if you get enough people to kind of get involved, but hopefully in a kind of controlled, safe way, that you can still take action and affect some kind of change. I think that's what we all want to do, and whether it's in our personal lives or professionally, we all want to kind of open up these conversations that will have some kind of impact that will influence the way that people think and behave, and even if it's just kind of examining some of our own attitudes about gender, that can only be a positive thing, I think.
And this thing about how men behave towards women and then how they react, it can almost be cyclical in terms of if women are hypersensitive because of the way they're treated, if you removed the way they were treated, then that would just make life easier for everyone in terms of how people interact. And this idea that men acting like, why are you having a go at us? Why are you attacking us? There would be no reason to have a go at men if men just behaved, and it would make it better for everyone in terms of the dynamic between genders.
I think men need to be rational in terms of behaviour. I think we've treated women as objects for so long and a commodity, and like it's just an expectation that you should act a certain way for our benefit. It's at our disposal, and I think that's the shift in mindset we need to kind of overcome to kind of move past this kind of sticky area we're in now, banter, toxicity of males. it's sickening to hear these kind of comments, and we, like you said, we need to get a bit of traction in terms of a collection of people calling these kind of behaviours out and not acceptable. And obviously in an environment which is safe and practical to make these kind of suggestions to do so. But the root of it lies within us.
I've never experienced life without my phone, or a world without the internet, or a world without this and not that. There's so many different ideologies, there's so many different mindsets, there's so many different people that are just putting their stuff out there, their business out there, and we take it in, we soak it in, and we don't really look at it twice. We look at it with like, wow, that's funny. Like, but then you don't know that it's kind of like you're getting trained, and the algorithms are crazy on Instagram and social media and that. So you're gonna see certain things that like, wow, this is actually, you're not gonna see it from like a standpoint is like, hang on, that was a bit mad. Like, this is the way that this guy is portraying his wife, his girlfriend. That's a bit mad. But from a viewer's perspective, what he was even trying to do is make it into a joke. But then it's starting to get normalized. So it's kind of crazy when we come from a different time period as well. It's like, you've never like had, people living in their fantasies, I think. The fantasies where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna make a joke about this today because I've seen it online and it's gonna be cool, it's gonna be funny for the situation. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
A girl might not have seen a video and then not understand the context of where you get that joke from. It's like the banter thing is crazy, I can't lie. The banter topic.
What you consume is what you become, isn't it?
Exactly, for real. So people need to be careful what they consume.
Well, in terms of that, I mean, one thing that we can't control are our algorithms on various social media. I suppose the important thing for that is just being aware and knowing this is wrong or this isn't a joke.
That's right. Facts.
Because like you say, like a lot of the stuff we are fed, and even before social media, society was feeding us signals and messages, and it's about at the very least we can just be aware that those situations exist and those dynamics exist that are feeding into what we understand to be true.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, again, like speaking to everything that, you just mentioned, I think, we're all familiar with people like Andrew Tate and, who's like, just a horrifying example of like toxic masculinity, and kind of alpha male bro kind of culture. And yet, for a lot of young guys, he's a role model. A lot of boys, teenagers look up to him as an example of how they think they should behave or what it means to be a man. And I don't know how we've got to that point. And even people like the former US President Trump, the comments he made, about touching women, like, those are just like examples, but they're not isolated incidents, and I'm sure in our own lives, there'll have been times when people that we know and trust and feel a close connection with have probably said or done things, if not quite that bad, still, highly inappropriate.
But having these kind of conversations and hoping that men can feel comfortable to have these kind of conversations is really important, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the other thing I would say is, we've been talking to each other and listening to each other. I think we also need to just shut up and listen to women as well. I think, we can like kind of do all the research, but that can be very abstract and very intellectual. I think, if you can sit down, have a chat, but actually just listen to the women in your life. It might be difficult, it might be painful, they might not want to. It can be an invitation, even if you just say like, I want to help, I want to make things better. If you're comfortable, I'd love to know, what your experiences are, how I can help you, and that creates that solidarity, that allyship as well. Because, it requires all of us to be involved. It's not a case of like, who's at fault, who's to blame. I think we all take responsibility. We all work together and all help each other.
And just to finish off, I think it'd be good if we each basically share something we'd learned today, that was something that we didn't know when we walked in, or has become more clear to us now, and also one piece of advice that we'd give to any men watching?
I've definitely felt that I need to almost not become too superficial in terms of the amount of desire I want to get to know, like my family, my sisters, my mum. I want to go a little bit deeper. I want to understand them on a more deeper level, so I can really understand what it takes to be a woman, because I think that will only help me grow. Especially with my partner as well. I think having open discussions about how they are feeling and what is their kind of passions and what is their kind of drawbacks as well, what are their kind of flaws, that you can work together as a healthy relationship as well. But one little message I'd like to kind of put to men is to be vulnerable. I think deep down we're all very kind of insecure about ourselves, and this is why we get these kind of the bravado of men, the ego. It's a protection. It's a layer of kind of keeping within ourselves. We don't want to get exposed. So just be vulnerable. Definitely vulnerable.
Yeah, I believe that throughout this whole conversation, men need to look at themselves and ask, how do you define being a gentleman? Because if you feel like saying something completely absurd, it's being a gentleman. It's not. It's really not. In other people's perspective, it's not. And as well, create more conversations with like ladies in their life, like a lady that who they'd actually would like have to have a long conversation with, who they can have a conversation with, and just understand their point of view, and just being slow to speak, quick to listen to what they're saying. Don't take it personally. They're just giving you their point of view for real. And it's like most men need that because they're misinformed and they're just not understanding that where they're wrong. So it seriously needs to start from at any age. It's never too late. Just try it now. Learn of the opposite sex for sure.
I'm going to try and use this as a starting point to like have these conversations with some of the men in my life. And hopefully, you know, I'll develop the kind of the skills I need, the courage to then kind of start having those conversations with other people that I'm not as close to. And if we're part of the reason, a big part of the reason for that, then we really need to like ask ourselves some difficult questions and examine why do I think that way? Why do I behave that way? You know, why do I think I have a right to do that? You know, so I think now is the time for us to really challenge ourselves, to ask ourselves that, you know, why do I think I have a right to treat women that way, to speak to them, and also to challenge our friends and family, the men in our life, to kind of join us, because this is a movement, you know, and we need solidarity and we need as many people for that allyship for it to be effective.
I think for me, one thing I've realised is it's not a simple case of this is something that men do and it happens to women. I think one thing that's become clear is it affects everyone. It affects men, it affects women, and it's just a horrendous thing that half the population have to live scared and have to take precautions and have to be afraid of the other half. Like, that's not good for anyone. And my one piece of advice would be, look inward. Don't only look at your behaviour and the way you're acting, but look at how it's harming you. It's not good for anyone. A situation where people are afraid and the interaction you have with them is already starting off on a negative point. So it's just that thing of like, look at how it's affecting you, look at how it's affecting everyone, and it's not okay to them, but it's not okay to you if nothing changes.